When Kobe Bryant died, his widow inherited an estate reported at around $600 million. Everybody assumed the story ended there: a grieving family, a trust fund, and a quiet life. But instead, Vanessa Bryant turned a $6 million bet her husband made into a $400 million payday, walked away from the biggest sneaker company on earth and got a better deal a year later, and won one of the most significant privacy cases in California history. So how did she do it? Let's get into it. Chapter 1. What she actually inherited. Let's start with what actually landed in Vanessa Bryant's hands, because the scale of it is genuinely enormous. And it was far more complicated than a bank account. On January 26, 2020, Kobe Bryant died in a helicopter crash in Calabasas, California, along with their 13-year-old daughter Gianna and 7 other people. He was 41. And what he left behind was not a simple pile of money. It was a working, operating, multi-armed business. Reports put his net worth at the time at around $600 million. But that figure is made of very different pieces. $328 million in NBA salary earned across 20 seasons, making him the highest-paid shooting guard in league history. Endorsement relationships with Nike, Coca-Cola, McDonald's, Mercedes-Benz, Turkish Airlines, Panini. A venture capital firm called Bryant Stibel that he'd started with entrepreneur Jeff Stibel, holding positions across tech and media. A production company. Real estate. And a stake in a sports drink almost nobody was paying attention to. Vanessa became the executor of the estate and the person responsible for all of it. And that venture capital firm is worth pausing on because it tells you the kind of machine she was handed. Bryant Stibel launched around 2013 with a reported $100 million, and it wasn't a celebrity vanity fund. It took positions across serious technology and media companies, with reported exposure to names like Alibaba, Dell, and the maker of Fortnite. Kobe had spent his post-basketball years turning himself into an actual investor, and that meant the estate wasn't a bank balance to sit on. It was a portfolio with moving parts, board seats, and decisions that needed making. And one of the very first things Vanessa had to deal with was a piece of paperwork that will break your heart a little. The family trust hadn't been updated. Their youngest daughter, Capri, had been born in June of 2019, just months before the crash, and hadn't yet been added as a beneficiary. So among the first legal filings Vanessa made as a widow was a petition to amend her husband's trust to include their own baby. That's the reality of what inheriting a fortune actually looks like. Not a check, but a mountain of legal machinery that has to be operated correctly while you are in the worst moment of your life. And here's the thing nobody expected. The conventional path for a widow handed an estate that size is preservation. Hire the advisors, protect the principal, keep it steady for the kids. Vanessa Bryant didn't do that. Within 2 years, she'd close one of the biggest athlete investment payouts in history, publicly break with Nike, and take on Los Angeles County in federal court. And the first of those started with a bet her husband made in 2014 that almost everyone at the time thought was strange. Chapter 2. The $6 million bet that became $400 million. In March of 2014, Kobe Bryant put roughly $6 million into a small sports drink company called Body Armor, in exchange for about 10% of the business. And at the time, this looked like a rich athlete throwing money at a long shot. Body Armor had just come off a year with around $10 million in sales, and it was going up against Gatorade. A brand so dominant, it's basically a synonym for the entire category, owned by PepsiCo. Competing with Gatorade is one of those things that sounds less like a business plan and more like a dare. But Kobe saw something, and he didn't just write a check and disappear. He joined the board and became one of the brand's most visible champions. The founder later said flatly that without Kobe's vision and belief, Body Armor wouldn't have achieved what it did. Then the thing snowballed. By 2018, Coca-Cola bought a minority stake, which valued the company at a level that turned Kobe's $6 million position into roughly $200 million. A more than 30 times return in about 4.5 years. That year, Body Armor was projected to top $400 million in sales, from $10 million when he'd invested. It had become the #2 sports drink in the country, behind only Gatorade and ahead of Coke's own Powerade, which is a genuinely absurd thing for a startup to pull off in that category. And then in November of 2021, with Vanessa now overseeing the estate and holding a seat on Body Armor's board of directors, Coca-Cola came back and bought the company outright for $5.6 billion. It was the largest amount Coca-Cola had ever paid to acquire a brand, full stop. And Kobe's estate collected a reported $400 million from that single transaction. Let that number sit for a second, because here's the comparison that makes it staggering. That one investment returned more to his family than his entire 20-year NBA playing salary. 20 seasons of championships, of Mamba mentality, of 81-point games, and a $6 million bet on a sports drink beat all of it. And Coca-Cola, in a genuinely classy touch, announced the acquisition at exactly 8:24 in the morning, a nod to both of Kobe's retired jersey numbers. But that windfall was a bet Kobe placed. The very next move was purely Vanessa's, and it was a nerve-shredding one. Speaking of one sharp decision out-earning 2 decades of work, a lot of it comes down to how the brain performs when the moment matters. That's the idea behind an audio series called The Genius Switch. It's based on the neuroscience of the flow state, that mode where focus and creativity click at the same time. And the whole routine is just listening with headphones a few minutes a day. It's a one-time $39, less than a single online course, and it's backed by a 90-day money-back guarantee, so you can test it on yourself with nothing to lose. If you're watching on your TV, pause and scan the QR code on screen with your phone camera, or tap the first link in the description. Now, back to the boldest call she ever made. Chapter 3. The day she walked away from Nike. On April 13, 2021, Kobe Bryant's contract with Nike expired, and Vanessa Bryant chose not to renew it. Understand how enormous that decision was. Kobe had been with Nike since 2003. His signature shoes were, at that moment, the most worn sneakers by players on NBA courts, more than any other signature line in the league, years after his death. This was one of the most valuable relationships in the entire sneaker industry, and the estate walked. Reporting at the time indicated the frustration was about availability, that Nike had been limiting how much Kobe product actually got made, including a shortage of his shoes in kids' sizes. Vanessa's public statement was pointed and measured. Kobe and Nike had made some of the most beautiful basketball shoes of all time. More NBA players wear his product than any other signature shoe, and her hope would always be to let his fans get and wear his products. Then she added 5 words that told you exactly who was running this. I will continue to fight for that. And what followed proved her leverage was real. Nike froze new Kobe releases. Resale prices on existing pairs went vertical. NBA players were reportedly scrambling to hunt down fresh pairs to actually play in, because they didn't want to wear anything else. The absence of the product became a news story in its own right, which is about the strongest possible evidence that the estate held the valuable side of that table. And there was a real chance she'd go it alone. Before he died, Kobe had already been exploring the idea of launching his own Mamba brand once the Nike deal ran out. He'd reportedly met with a creative agency in December of 2019 to start mapping out what that could look like. After the expiration, the family's attorney filed several trademarks, and there was genuine industry speculation that Vanessa was about to build an independent house rather than re-sign with anybody. Whether or not she ever intended to, that possibility was sitting on the table the entire time she was negotiating. That's leverage. There was also a genuinely painful moment in that gap. In June of 2021, photos surfaced of a shoe called the Mamba Cheetah, a design Vanessa had personally created in honor of Gianna, even though she hadn't approved it for sale and hadn't re-signed with Nike. She posted publicly that the shoes were not approved, that Nike had not sent any pairs to her or her daughters, and that she hoped they hadn't been sold. Her own daughter's memorial shoe was out in the world and she didn't have one. And then, in March of 2022, 11 months after walking away, the two sides came back together on terms that look a lot like a win. The partnership was renewed. Kobe's models came back. A Gianna product line launched, starting with the Kobe 6 Protro Mamba Cheetah Sweet 16, released around what would have been her 16th birthday. Nike agreed to donate 100% of the net proceeds from Gianna's shoes to the Family Foundation every year. And they committed to building a youth basketball center in Southern California, She left the table, waited out the biggest sneaker company on the planet, and came back with a deal that funded her daughter's legacy in perpetuity. Chapter 4. The company she actually runs. Here's the part of Vanessa Bryant's empire that gets almost no attention. She isn't just a beneficiary or a signature on documents. She holds an operating title. She is the president and chief executive officer of Granity Studios. Granity was the multimedia company Kobe founded back in 2013, headquartered in Newport Beach, built around a specific idea, telling stories through the lens of sports, aimed largely at young people. It's the operation behind the Academy, award-winning short film, Dear Basketball, and behind a whole line of young adult novels, the Wizenard series, Legacy and the Queen, the Epica books. This was genuinely Kobe's second act, the thing he was building after basketball, the work he was arguably most proud of. And after his death, that company could very easily have been quietly wound down. Instead, Vanessa took the CEO title and kept it publishing. The Wizenard series Season 1 came out in March of 2020, weeks after the crash, and went to #1 on the New York Times middle grade hardcover list. Think about what that took: running a publishing operation, hitting release dates, managing a staff, keeping a creative pipeline alive, while grieving in the most public way imaginable. This isn't passive wealth management. It's a job, and she took it. She also sits on the board of Body Armor, which means during that Coca-Cola process, she wasn't a bystander watching a windfall arrive. She had a seat in the room. So the picture that emerges is not a widow with advisors. It's an executive with titles, board seats, and operating responsibility across multiple businesses. But the fight that defined her more than any deal wasn't a business negotiation at all. It happened in a federal courtroom. Chapter 5. The case she took to a federal jury. In the aftermath of the crash, Vanessa Bryant learned that employees of the Los Angeles County Sheriff's and fire departments had taken and shared unauthorized photographs from the crash site. Images of the victims' remains passed around outside of any official purpose. In September of 2020, she sued Los Angeles County for negligence and invasion of privacy. And she did not settle quietly, which she easily could have. She took it all the way to a federal jury trial in the summer of 2022, an 11-day trial, in public, in which she testified. She told the court she lived in fear of those images surfacing on social media, where her daughters might see them. Her attorney later noted that the county had at one point attempted to force her to submit to an involuntary psychiatric examination, and that she never faltered through any of it. In August of 2022, the jury found for her. Vanessa Bryant was awarded $16 million, later adjusted to $15 million over a clerical error, and a second plaintiff, Chris Chester, who lost his wife Sarah and his 13-year-old daughter Peyton in the same crash, was awarded $15 million. The jury found the sheriff's department had an established practice of sharing such photos. Then, in February of 2023, the county settled all remaining claims for $28.85 million total, which covered the verdict plus future claims on behalf of her daughters. Her attorney called it the culmination of a courageous battle to hold accountable those who engaged in the conduct, noting she'd fought not only for her husband and daughter, but for everyone in the community whose deceased family had been treated the same way. And here's what she did with the money. She announced she was donating it to the Mamba and Mamba Cheetah Sports Foundation, nearly $30 million awarded to her over the worst violation imaginable, and she routed it straight into a charity for kids. Which brings us to what that foundation actually is. Chapter 6. The Foundation and the Name. The Mamba Sports Foundation was something Kobe started in 2016 to support young athletes. After the crash, Vanessa did something small and enormous at the same time. She renamed it. It became the Mamba and Mamba Cheetah Sports Foundation, permanently writing her daughter into the institution alongside her father. The foundation's work is aimed at underserved young athletes, boys and girls, creating access to sports and funding programming for kids who wouldn't otherwise get it. And it wasn't her only philanthropic inheritance either. Back in 2007, she and Kobe had jointly founded the Kobe and Vanessa Bryant Family Foundation, which put minority students through college on scholarships. Giving was already part of the architecture of their marriage. She just took over running it alone. and Vanessa engineered her business deals to feed it. That Nike agreement isn't just a licensing deal. 100% of the net proceeds from Gianna's shoe line goes to the foundation, every year, indefinitely. The nearly $30 million from the county settlement went there. The Youth Basketball Center in Southern California came out of the same negotiation. Look at the architecture of that, because it's genuinely clever. She built a structure where the commercial value of her family's name automatically converts into funding for kids' sports. The more Kobe and Gigi sneakers sell, the more the foundation gets. It runs on its own. She didn't just write checks. She wired the philanthropy directly into the business, so it keeps going without depending on anyone's generosity in a given year. And she's kept showing up in other ways too. When the Los Angeles wildfires tore through in early 2025, destroying, among thousands of others, the first home she and Kobe ever shared in the Palisades. She was publicly out helping victims, delivering gifts to affected kids. Chapter 7. How she actually lives. So what does life look like for a woman managing an estate this size? Quieter and more grounded than you'd guess. Vanessa lives in Newport Coast, in Orange County. One county over from the Los Angeles world she and Kobe were the center of for 2 decades. Her home there has been reported at around $10 million, roughly 6,000 square feet, 6 bedrooms, 7 bathrooms, canyon views. It's a beautiful house by any measure, but notice what it isn't. It's not a $40 million Beverly Hills compound. There's no fleet of hypercars, no yacht, no Instagram feed built around flexing the estate. For someone with the resources she has, it is a strikingly normal version of wealthy. And her actual public life is mostly her daughters. Natalia, the eldest, has grown into a young woman with her own modeling career and a degree from USC. Bianca and Capri are still kids. Vanessa turns up at Dodgers games and Lakers events, at the Baby 2 baby galas, at the Hall of Fame induction where she accepted her husband's enshrinement. She's built a life that keeps her family's public legacy alive while keeping her actual family relatively private. A genuinely difficult balance when the whole world feels ownership over your husband's name. And she's protective of that name in a way that's now well documented. She's pushed back publicly on unauthorized products, on people trading on Kobe and Gianna's images, on anyone treating her family's story as free inventory. That protectiveness isn't sentimentality, it's asset management. The name is the asset. Which brings us to the real answer to the question this whole video is built on. Chapter 8. How inheritance turned into an opportunity. So step back and look at the whole thing, because the title of this video is only half the story, and the missing half is the interesting one. Yes, Vanessa Bryant inherited a fortune, a reported $600 million estate built by one of the most relentless competitors who ever lived. Nobody's pretending she started from nothing. But here's what happened after. A $6 million body armor stake closed out at a reported $400 million on her watch, in a $5.6 billion sale to Coca-Cola, with her sitting on the company's board. She walked away from Nike, absorbed 11 months of a very public standoff, and returned with a deal that gave her daughter a signature shoe line and permanently funded a foundation. She took a CEO title at a publishing company and put a book at #1 on the New York Times list weeks after burying her husband and her daughter. She took Los Angeles County to a federal jury and won, then gave the money away. Estimates now place her personal net worth in the neighborhood of $600 million, which means that after 4 years of paying out, giving away, and reinvesting, the number is roughly where it started or better. That doesn't happen by accident. Most inherited fortunes shrink. That's the actual statistic. The overwhelming majority of large estates get smaller with each passing generation, worn down by taxes, bad advice, family conflict, and the simple fact that preserving money is a completely different skill from making it. Vanessa Bryant did the opposite, and she did it while grieving in front of 100 million strangers, while raising 3 daughters, and while fighting a government in court over the worst thing anyone has ever done to her family. And the through line in every single one of those decisions is the same. She refused to let anyone else control what her husband and daughter's names meant. Not Nike, not a county sheriff's department, not a merchandiser, not a publisher. She took the one asset that can't be bought or replaced, a legacy, and she managed it like the serious business it is, then pointed the proceeds at kids who play sports. Kobe Bryant spent 20 years building the Mamba mentality into something people quote in gyms all over the world. It turns out the person who understood it best was the one sitting next to him the whole time. If stories about how the biggest names turn legacy into empires that outlast them are what brought you here, subscribe to Black Status, and we'll keep delivering them. See you in the next one.